You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and in this edition, just to change things up entirely, I'm going to take a fully back seat and just let these three talk so I don't have to.
Unlikely.
Hi, I'm JR.
I'm Dylan.
I'm Luke.
And I'm Simon.
So this is our season review. I've talked about all the episodes as they came out, and obviously I'm also going to be hosting the listeners' poll in a couple of weeks. So I can mostly stay out of this conversation. No, I can't, can I? I will try and mostly leave the door open for you three to talk about your opinions about season two. Seeing as, well, with the odd exception, Luke, you joined us for the song contest one.
Yeah.
I think that's it, actually. Dylan and Simon, I don't think you've been on any. And Dylan,
No,
you only started watching with episode five, is that right?
pretty much. So, I mean, I guess I'll say my piece and then shut up for half an hour, I guess, until it becomes relevant. I jumped off after the last series, and I was always like, well, I'll jump in if something interesting happens or if someone says you need to see this. So, I did try and watch Lucky Day, but only lasted 7 minutes. And then when I heard the Rani had shown up, I was like, okay, I need to watch Eurovision. So I watched the last three, and then I jumped back to watch the story in the engine because I always wanted to watch that one anyway because I'd heard about Joe Martin and I was interested in the writer. So yeah, I've not seen the first four, but wasn't the second half great?
Well, okay, no, I will stay with you because I want to ask everybody what was your sort of overall opinion from the series. And I suppose at the end, I'll say, what's your takeaway opinion from the series? And we are basically going to stick with the immediate past of Doctor Who rather than have our third hour-long conversation of the week about the future of Doctor Who. I think we've done that one to death for the time being,
But
at
but, but
least.
they, aren't they announcing David Tennant's coming back tonight on Confidential?
Oh, well, maybe. I mean, actually, is that a thing? Because Liam messaged me on Instagram, but on my phone I can't pick up. So he just
Uh,
linked through to something, so I
there's a
didn't see what
web
it was.
there's a website reporting it,
It's
but
it's the Sun that have reported it. There's
oh, is
nothing
it?
on the confidential. I've seen it.
Right,
How have you?
okay.
Yeah,
How was it?
it was all right. There's a bit towards the end where they just talk about Wales and how good Wales is, and I really started to drift off.
It's up on the iPlayer already, and they're broadcasting it tonight,
Ah,
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right. So no, they're not announcing David Tennant. Dylan, let me stick with you before I talk to Simon and Luke. So, for the sake of the listener or the viewer who's watching or listening to this, so why did you tune out? And what did you think of the bits you did see? You've just said it was great. I don't know if you were being
I was
ironic
being
or not.
sarcastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Episode five was great. That was everything that I wanted from the new RTD era. I just, it was like the Chibnall era, but with a bit more heart to it and a little bit more character work. Um, I tuned out because I didn't like the characterization of the Doctor. I didn't like the actor. I didn't like the companion. I didn't like the writing, and I didn't want to become Angry Man on the internet. So I just thought I'd become Angry Man in our WhatsApp group
Yeah.
instead.
Well, you're very successful at that. And
Thank
you
you.
didn't enjoy the, well, I suppose we'll get to talking about the episodes, the stories anyway, when we get to it in due course. Okay, Simon, what
Hmm.
what did you think of the series overall?
Um, a more overarching issue for me to kind of take Dylan's side to an extent is, whenever I look back on the old RTD stories, I find they dated far more than possibly anything else in Doctor Who history,
I think
really.
they've dated pretty much more than anything else that's ever been seen on a screen anywhere, haven't
Well,
they?
yeah, yeah, but and this is the thing, and every time watching the new series, um, I'm instantly picking up certain aspects of it, like the volume of the music and the fact that it's all kind of everything's in your face and everything's very big and colourful, which I haven't got necessarily got a problem with, but what I have got a problem with, and I've mentioned it before, is the feeling that the people involved with the program are self-aware that this is Doctor Who, that it's sci-fi, that it's a bit of fun. Isn't this great that I'm on Doctor Who? Rather than treating it like any other role. And whether that's a taste thing or whether that's a criticism, I couldn't tell you. But it means that this era has to work that little bit harder for me. to get on board, if that makes sense.
I got most of that from the first RTD. I was just thinking everybody's having an absolute whale of a time down in Wales, but it doesn't make for great serious telly. And yeah, okay, it's Doctor Who. It's not meant to be that serious, but you've got to take it seriously if you're going to buy into it and suspend your disbelief. And I found increasingly the first time around that I wasn't doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like, I think, in some ways, the whole of the first era was stuck in the mid 90s, right? It wanted to be Buffy meets X-Files. And this feels like it's still stuck in the 90s. Lovely new cameras, lovely new special effects, lovely new HD, but it's all still stuck in about 1996 or something.
I mean, the hope was that RTD post Years and Years was going to bring something forward, that his mind was ticking over in a slightly different way. I mean, I think that is the case. That has borne out in a lot of the subject matter
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and a lot of the depth and a lot of the I suppose we'll talk about it later. It's virtually poetry, some of it, whether it's accidental or not, I'm not sure, but it seems to be working in ways that hasn't happened before. But as you talked about, because I've listened to the podcast to try and keep on top of it, and
Unlike somebody, Dylan.
I've done my
Look,
homework,
I've
Dylan.
given up on Doctor Who. I only listen to wrestling podcasts now.
We're human beings. We're not Doctor Who, though.
Given up on
But
it all.
the hope was RTD would have moved on and shifted into a later album phase. But unfortunately, a lot of the time it just feels like it's completely regressed, which I should have expected it because I guess that's what the BBC wanted of him.
Wow.
It's the remastered, re-released album, isn't it?
Yeah,
Rather than the experimental new album,
yeah.
or at the very most, it's a remix album.
It's the subject matter may have changed, but the song remains the same.
So poetic, JR.
Oh, well, don't blame
That's
me.
not what
Blame.
the Ood said.
Even Murray Gold's material has regressed for the most part.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, right. So give us a little bit of positivity there, Luke.
Well, I struggle to get back into to it really.
Oh,
For someone
really?
that really enjoyed season one, um, until Empire of Death sort of broke all goodwill.
Right.
And when that ended and Mrs. Flood was on the rooftop teasing more mysteries that you knew weren't going to be satisfying or have any thought put into them, that was a bit like, ugh, it's hard to go again. But I actually think a huge factor was the 8 a.m. starts to watch it. And I only thought about this when I was in the cinema last week, re-watching Wish World, and a lot of the stuff that hadn't worked the first time was working. And obviously in the cinema you've got people on board doing everything, but I do think it was just being more awake and more up for watching TV rather than sort of getting up and forcing myself to watch it at 8 o'clock. I know that's a choice,
No,
but it's
yeah,
a
but
choice that many fans will have made, and it, it was weird to start your day like that, I think.
were you doing midnight all last year?
Yeah, and that was great because that felt like you were waiting all day, and then you got to midnight, and it was like the treat at the end of the day. And you know, yeah, and
Yeah.
like being up for it on the Friday night was fun.
I
Um,
don't know why they've changed it because the midnight,
because it
I
makes
don't,
no difference. It
yeah,
makes no difference because if you're gonna watch it at 8, you'll watch it at 8 anyway if it's out at midnight. So that
yeah.
that was odd, but I only really realised that in the cinema last week. But in them first few weeks when everyone seems to be loving Belinda and the stories, I was sort of like, it's just fine. It's just more of the same. And then weirdly, the last three all really worked, and they were the ones where everyone else said they were crap. But
Well,
I
apart
mean,
from us, we were quite positive
true,
on the
yeah.
podcast.
I
Yeah.
thought the reality war for as much fan wanky stuff was going on in it. Has you made the allusion to Hellbent, where it's literally here's all the stuff we're not going to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's this brand new idea. The Doctor and the Companion have a child. What do you do with that? I found that fascinating. But I suppose
But it didn't go anywhere.
I suppose you either like or don't like the reality war fully
Yeah.
based on if you buy into that idea or not.
I guess we'll get there, Dylan, but I think it went to a really interesting place, and I think it went to the same place as the Timeless Children went,
Oh, I
frankly.
don't. I think they had an idea of what they wanted to do with this character that was going to span out over the next season and all this exciting stuff, and they realized they couldn't do it, so they just had to write another dull ending where the child is another nobody, and all of a sudden this exciting new companion of color they brought in, they've just gone, "You're a housewife, go away."
Yeah, maybe we'll get
It,
there. We'll
it
get
worked for
there.
me, but overall, I thought it was sort of creatively bankrupt in so many areas, and then right towards the end, there was a flutter of new ideas that bogged in the middle of this
Yeah,
fan
yeah.
wank cake.
Well, it did start, didn't it, with like 4 or 5 episodes that basically just repeated almost exactly in some cases what had happened last year.
Yeah, and them episodes were repeating things like Smith and Jones and other influences. So it's a bit like Christ,
It's
seen
like,
it.
yeah, it's RTD through the third degree of RTD.
And I think fundamentally, I get annoyed when it feels like people are making things for the sake of it rather than making it because they want to make it. And that's the vibe I got quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, that certainly those sort of first 3 episodes felt a bit like that. Let's get to them then. So Dylan's gonna put himself on mute while we talk about the first 4 episodes, as if. I guess though, I'll ask you later. I'll start asking you, Dylan, when we get to episode 5. But if you do want to chip in with
I
something,
might have something to say.
yeah, for sure.
I've read about stuff.
But I'll basically talk to the other two for the time being. Actually, I'm going to start with you, Simon,
Mm.
because no, I'm not. I'm going to start with Luke because I want to start with you on Lux, Simon. But both of these first 2 episodes feel like they could be right more up your street. But Luke, then, okay, sticking with you, the Robot Revolution. What did you make of it?
Honestly, nothing. Like I've got no thoughts on it whatsoever. That's not great for the podcast, but I remember saying it on the day as well when everyone was like, "Oh, let's talk about the new season. What did you think?" And it was just like it's like RTD's put a or someone's asked a chat GPT to write an RTD season opener. That's what you get. And it was so just devoid of any originality that just left a zero impression on me, to be honest.
I think the one thing that stuck out for me is that scene on the bench at the start, where he gives, in a way, he gives the game away as soon as he starts talking about sort of she should be Miss if she's not married rather than whatever.
Yeah.
That,
I didn't particularly mind all that stuff. Actually, my favorite scene in it was when they killed the cat, just because it was sort of out of nowhere, and you thought, "What the? Why has he
yeah,
done
yeah,
that?"
actually
But
made you
it woke me
react,
up.
right?
It woke me
Yeah.
up. Yeah, it made me feel something. Controversial somehow that it was, but
But even the villain at the end, you kind of get this thing, oh, it's Planet of the Incels. But they didn't actually show us a Planet of the Incels. They
no,
just kind of threw
and
that line in.
he's not an incel. He's pulled Varada see-through. Like, how is he an
Yeah, true.
incel?
I think the meaning of that word has kind of morphed, hasn't it? Or it's certainly morphed in this conversation as a sort of umbrella term for all
I-
sorts of other
I'll
things,
give it
hasn't it?
one credit. I liked the design of Al as like a sort of Metropolis slash
Yeah.
that thing from episode 3 of the
Have you
Stranger
ever seen
Village.
Superman 3?
No,
Ah, watch Superman 3 and you'll see where
is,
all that
is
came
it just?
from. Yeah.
See, I've not seen Superman 3 since it was in the pictures. I don't think I've even seen it on telly,
Oh,
just at the.
we need to do those films for the
I
podcast.
do those.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, maybe we will then. But go on then, Simon. So,
Oh,
Robot
there's
Revolution, it's all about the design, really. Like Luke says, the story is just ChatGPT's version of Russell T Davis, but the design is what makes that story, isn't it?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, it was. I think it was impressive. I mean, I'm always impressed with the creativity of the production team. You can't take that away from them. I mean, it did look, it literally looked $1 million. But
Probably
going back to
nearer
the
10, I
Superman,
think.
yeah, it's the whole scene in Superman 3 where one of the characters gets taken over by a supercomputer, and you see her get absorbed in, and all these pieces of metal stick to her, and she becomes like a cyborg type possessed person. And it's just for some reason it resonated the same thing, but equally it looked as dated as that as well. I wasn't a fan of that effect or the makeup or the character.
Did you like the story, though?
I can't remember a lot about it, if I'm completely honest. That's probably age as much as anything. I really liked Belinda. Really liked her all the way through the series. And I hate that thing with fans say, "Oh, that actor was sorely underused or poorly served in the script and things like that." But you know,
She, I think, corresponds with Bill. Bill is brought in because Stephen Moffat has to do one extra series or volunteers to do one extra series, and he doesn't really have an idea of what it's going to be. So he brings in this great actress, gives her a nicely written but fairly thin character, and at the end of the series, she basically has no agency in where she
Yeah.
goes and how
Bill
the
is good
story
though.
ends. Yeah, Bill is good in the same way I think as Belinda is.
Belinda's a bit more of a cipher for me. It feels a lot more like
I got
draft one.
I got nothing from her in the four ones that I
Yeah, whereas
saw.
I immediately get Bill's personality and character coming through in the
This
pilot.
Yeah, sure.
this is the thing.
But I
I think.
think if you
Go on.
do, sorry, just to finish this point that Dylan's just brought up, I think if you were just to watch the last sort of 3 or 4 episodes of Bill,
Oh
you wouldn't
no.
get.
Yeah,
I
you
don't.
would. She's so charismatic, especially she gets all that wonderful stuff in Eaters of Light, and then all those big emotional moments in the finale. Like
Yeah.
she's there for the duration, and her
And she
character.
she perks up twice upon a time as well, 20
Yeah,
minutes in.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
maybe. But then I do think Belinda, although her character is sidelined, by I think by the production, because obviously we all know basically that most of that stuff was really meant for Ruby Sunday, right?
Yeah.
So Belinda is a function of the production, but I do think she gets some great emotional acting beats. I
Hmm.
just think that those great emotional acting beats were intended for a different character, and so there's this weird thing at the end where the character comes undone by the fact that her lines were supposed to be coming out of somebody else's mouth. I think it makes for a really interesting watch, though. I do,
I
but
know what you mean. I know what you
yeah.
mean, especially right at the end, reality war, time's been sort of changing around her anyway. Sort of, it sort of works.
It's
Yeah.
Star Wars levels of accidental brilliance, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's
yeah,
that, Han Solo levels of brilliance, that things happen by accident that just made it great. Is the fact that she spent the whole series kind of being predisposed about something else. It's almost like something else was on her mind the whole time, and she never fully invested on where she was. There's that kind of Tegan thing of wanting to get home all the time. And then you find out at the end, oh, yeah, it's because there was this child that she didn't even really know about.
Well, she didn't know about because I think reality bends around her. I don't think that child. A lot of fans have said, "Oh, so the real thing is that she had the child all the time, but we just didn't know about it." And I'm like, "No, what's happened is time has changed."
Imagine if that had
well,
been Ruby, she would have been a very, very young mum.
Yes, exactly. No, what's happened is time has changed and reality has bent around them. But I always used to say about Moffat, didn't I? That when you do the time has been rewritten stories, it's a bit like putting a fresh sheet of paper over the old sheet of paper and you write the new storyline on the fresh sheet of paper. But you can still just about make out the old story underneath, and the emotion bleeds through the paper into the characters.
For me, the inference in that last episode was that there was almost like this invisible thread, this destiny that Belle was, destined to become Poppy's mother all the
Yeah.
way through. That was the
Or
inference in that
Ruby
last
was.
episode.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
no, I
yeah.
agree with
Yeah.
Simon. I sort of got that, and I sort of because the reality where Poppy's not in it is the one where it blows up on the 24th of May.
Mm.
So when that's fixed, it is Poppy's back in it again.
I think it's a third reality. I think it shifts from the normal reality at the point of Mavity into a second reality, and then the Doctor shifts it again. But I don't think it goes back. I don't think it pings back to the first reality. I think
Yeah,
it
it
just
changes
pings
to a
into
third
a
one.
new
Yeah,
reality. Yeah.
yeah.
But doesn't
Anyway,
this kind of relate to the Big Bang? With this idea of bringing the Doctor back into reality
oh yeah,
by just
totally.
memory alone.
Well, this is what I think RTD is doing stuff that the other showrunners have done, and I think last year he leaned a bit more towards Chibnall, and this year he's leaned a bit more towards Moffat. And I think actually he's been really interesting when he's been doing very Moffat-y things. And although I don't think he does them as well as Moffat does, what he does is he does them less well, but he brings his own stuff to it as well. And then you get this really weird but interesting fusion of the two, which I don't think is as good as Moffat, but I think is way more interesting than RTD usually is. But the first half of the series is not RTD doing Moffat, it's RTD doing RTD, isn't it? To which Simon, the one
Mm.
that's about animated characters coming to life and so on and so forth, what did you think of Lux?
I thought it had an awful lot going for it, certainly in production values. I thought the animation, I being an animation fan, I thought I was going to watch it and think, oh, this is just the Doctor Who team just do just kind of being successful. Actually, it was a really successful bit of production, I thought. Um, it felt like it was a brilliant idea, encased in the Idiot's Lantern.
Yeah.
It's that kind of surrounded by wishy-washy pseudo-American characters. Yet again, not feeling like it's completely invested in what it's representing. And I thought, well, when you've got Disney money in there, then wow, surely this is an opportunity to show them, look what we can do. We can do an episode in America, which you'll find completely relatable. Um, but Alan
And then the
Cumming, I
whole
thought
thing
was
is,
great.
so then the whole thing is just set in one room again,
Yeah, yeah.
basically.
But I think it had an awful lot going for it, and I think the idea worked. Um, yeah, but it does again. It doesn't seem to be able to do something new without feeling like something old,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Did you?
I've got a couple of pals who work on the show, and one of them said it was the best of the season, and my brother said it was the worst of the season. So, you know,
Mm.
forever polarizing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then also, this goes to something that we never talk about. And the thing that we never talk about is the people who make the program, their perception of it is so different from the people who watch the program. Because when you're making something, you might be having a really good time with certain members of the cast or certain members of the production team that you get along really well with. You've got a really interesting set that you're enjoying working in. You go to some really nice locations where the locals are really friendly and you get to see some terrific views and stuff you've never done before. And then the episode that comes out the other end is like a piece of shit on a stick. But you know what I mean? You've had a
Yeah.
great time and fandom hates it or whatever, or
No,
vice versa. You might have had a really shitty time in the rain, you know, under dreadful conditions with a director whose guts you hated, and the movie that comes out the other end is Blade Runner.
Mm.
So
Mm.
it can go both ways.
I have
Totally.
worked on some things where genuinely we were having the best time and thought it was going to be amazing, and then sat down in the cinema to watch it and just like, oh, is that what we made?
Yeah. I think maybe sometimes you can have too good a time making something as well.
Exactly, and
Possibly.
that's all Russell's fault, isn't it?
Marvelous.
Everything's marvelous. He's having fun. Come on,
Yeah, yeah.
Russell.
Although, of course, Russell's probably living somewhere else anyway. He's probably not around much of the time. Luke, what did you think of your almost namesake of an episode?
That's
Yeah,
Molloy.
new name. Yeah, I enjoyed looks. To be fair, I agree. It's simultaneously old and new, and just had a bit of a ride with it. Yeah, I mean, it was very impressive. The effects in it were very impressive. It sort of felt new. I thought if you're enjoying something, you don't really notice that it's set in one room, and I sort of was just enjoying it and was just going with it, and I I simultaneously liked the fourth wall break thing, but it did bring the story to a screeching halt.
Mm.
That had a nice sort of pace and fun to it. I think if we'd have got Lux 20 years ago, that's the bit that would be different. It would just play out like a normal story and finish, and maybe that would have been better. But I had such a good time with it that even when he just floated off and makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Um, I was like, yeah, cool, fun. Next.
Right. Well, but speaking of if you're enjoying it, you don't mind that it's all set in one room. Luke, what did you think of the well?
Well, yeah, I struggled again. You shouldn't be watching something like this at 8 a.m. on a. I mean, it was a pretty sunny morning. I was watching it at 8 a.m. on holiday on an iPad. It's just not right, is it? It's just not the right thing to do.
No.
I really liked Rose. Well, I really liked Rosanna Ellis, so I was looking forward to seeing her, and I think she was really good in it. Um, I basically thought it all relied on that scene where people got flung across the room because it had been building up for 25 minutes till that scene, and I can't can't stand things where people are just thrown across the room and it's meant to be scary because it always looks funny, and so
Yeah.
I'd have rather they just crumpled to the ground or something. I like the chaos of it. I like the idea of it that suddenly it just all broke out and people were getting killed left, right, and center. but they were just flying across the room, so it
It just looked
didn't.
like outtakes from an old Lauren and Hardy film.
Yeah, it just didn't fundamentally work. And then the Midnight Connection, which I knew about in advance. I think a lot of people knew about it in advance. And then so you're looking out for where it's like the Midnight Creature, and it's not really acting like the Midnight Creature. It could have been any new creature.
Yeah.
And so that feels like, well, that feels like content then, and all the worst bits of RTD2 feel like content to try and grab headlines and
Do you know what it felt like to me? So I think the first 25 minutes is terrific. And then at the point where everybody starts getting thrown around the room, utterly, utterly lost me. And when I rewatched it, I was really enjoying the 25 minutes. And then at that point, I just fell asleep because it utterly, utterly lost me. But I think it goes slightly deeper than, oh, I don't like them throwing them across the room, and oh, I don't like the shoehorning in the midnight creature. Because what I think happens in the process of making something is you've got a story that's a bit like Midnight, but not very much like Midnight, but enough like Midnight that it makes somebody go, oh, this is a bit like Midnight. And then you try and squeeze that for the last 20 minutes into what Midnight was, and you end up changing the end of what your story was about. And you have to sort of massage all the elements of that story to try and squeeze them into that space where they don't really exist, such that it makes the last 20 minutes of the story just feel like something less pure, less direct, less straightforward. It feels the last 20 minutes of that just felt like it wasn't the story that the first 25 minutes was.
yeah, and I think it ties into a bigger issue, I think, of like the 15th Doctor. You don't really see him do heroic things or save the day particularly. And And I felt like when he was on the one-on-one scene facing off against it, something big was going to happen. But actually, he just runs away, and then someone gets shot, and then someone else kills themselves. And it's
Yeah,
like, well, you're meant to be the guy that stops the monsters.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
the only time I can really remember him doing things is like he saves the bogeyman in Space Babies. He drags Sutek through the time vortex, and after that, I'm sort of like, when does he actually save the day? But I think monsters and saving the day, which should be a key part of Doctor Who, is actually missing a hell of a lot from RTD2.
Yeah, I've spoke about this before. I have a theory about this, which is that I don't think in the 21st century, or at least if you're stuck in the 1990s and you're in the
Hello.
21st century, I don't think you can make monsters and villains like you made in the old run, because I think in you have to be more nuanced about it in this day and age, which is why Stephen Moffat often went to technology that's gone wrong. Because if you make a story about AI or something going wrong, right, everybody can understand that, and they don't go, "Oh, some guy somewhere is just being an absolute wanker."
I
Because
think it's just that monsters don't have a focus on them
yeah,
particularly.
yeah,
The
and so
focus has been lost from them.
well, that's what I mean. He's kind of fudging the issue, isn't it? He wants the monsters in there, but he doesn't want to tell stories about black and white villains that don't feel real.
Mm.
So you're kind of fudging all the sort of different areas of Doctor Who, aren't you?
Yeah.
Simon, what did you
Mm.
think of the well?
Again, production values were amazing. I thought it looked for based Under Siege. It was. I don't think it's
That
a
room was
series as
terrific.
totally.
I
Well,
don't. I
no, the
don't even.
outside bits were great as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Rose was the best thing in it. Um,
Yeah.
she really was because she was
Yeah.
consistent, and you just thought she's a person in the situation, and she's behaving exactly how a person in that situation would be. You know, that claustrophobia, and that moment where they were all going to leave the room and leave her there was really quite affecting, and that was all down to her performance. And that's all I ask. That's all I ask of an actor in Doctor Who. And you're right. You know, the moment things got started getting chucked around, you just thought, well, how is this possibly the same creature?
Hmm.
Well, I mean, yeah, maybe it's the same creature, but it's story wise, it doesn't make sense. And that you think there'd be something going on that does relate that creature to this. I don't want to be one of those podcasts that gets hung up on technicalities.
But it just wasn't the same thing at all. It
No.
just it just felt like it was in a similar area. So they said, okay, let's make it the same thing.
Isn't that
Yeah.
literally what happened there?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. You can tell. I think you watch that episode and you can 100% tell that that is not the creature from Midnight, but they've called it that because it's a callback.
Yeah, 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 100%.
And it just feels stupid. And as soon as you notice that, this is one of those things, isn't it, where everything else starts to niggle at you. Why would a crew of 12 people need to take a cook along to put things in the microwave? I mean, what else are they taking along? A milk monitor? You know, you
Is it?
don't need a cook for 12 people in a microwave.
It's probably health and safety. Like they need someone who can be trusted to operate the microwave.
So
Yeah,
they're,
space microwave.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. But
I thought
also,
there was two halves to the direction as well, though. I thought there was some lovely moments where you had Belle and the Doctor kind of kitting each other up and what have you. And you just thought, oh, this is really well directed. And then and then you get the scene where they're all being chucked around, and you think all the physical laws again going back to technicalities. But if you're going to introduce some kind of rule about how this creature works, you've got to make sure that works
yeah, yeah.
100%. And there were a
It,
number of occasions where it was like, oh, to hell with that. We're just going to run away from it.
it's because it's like a bit more of a serious tone. The technicalities matter, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
That's right. Yes. When you're being flippant, you can have fun with reality a bit. But if you're being serious, you need people to take you seriously.
yeah.
Right. Lucky day. Dylan, why did you give up after 7 minutes?
I just can't stand Millie Gibson.
He hates
Uh,
Ruby Sunday.
I can't stand her. Having said that, I thought she was great in the last episode, but we'll get onto that in a bit. But I just can't stand her. And but it's not just that. It's the tone of the era that I don't like. It's back to this heightened reality that I don't think was there in the previous era. And I'm just not in for that anymore. Like I liked it in 2005. Moffat sort of did a hybrid thing, I think, where some of it was heightened, some of it was more grounded. Chibnall went fully grounded, even if you don't like the era. Like I think he was trying to ground his characters
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
reality and the style of acting and style of performances. And so I'm just there and I'm seeing these big over the top performances in what's trying to be a slightly grittier episode. And I hate people that call Doctor Who gritty because it never is. But like it's trying to be serious and trying to tell like a serious story. And I'm like, I can't.
It's
These two
trying to
things that
feel. It's trying to feel like something else you might watch on television that just has that just has elements of Doctor Who
yeah.
in it. And yet, because it's got that heightened thing, it feels like a episode of Coronation Street from the 1990s.
Well, exactly. So I gave it 7 minutes, and everybody says it's great. But
And
I
you
just
stopped just before it got really interesting.
uh, I I think it's interesting that there was a big rumor going around that one of the episodes, this was like 2 years ago, was a sequel to Robot, and everybody thought K1 Robots, and it was just a nod to Think Tank, which I thought was brilliant.
Simon, what did you think of Lucky Day? Because Lucky Day, whatever you think of whether it's any good,
Hmm.
Lucky Day is the most interestingly constructed episode of the RTD2 era, I think.
Mm, mm. I mean, I have to go back to and support Dylan in what he said. I think he's hit on something really, really important. It's almost like a one-way street because we've suddenly had this kind of grown-up, grounded Doctor Who, and then we're going back to what feels like I'm using the word regression again, and maybe
Yeah, yeah.
that's what's hard to stomach. So I've picked up on exactly what Dylan's talking about, which is that heightened reality. Lucky Day. I'm just trying to remember. All I remember was the main guy, the kind of the antagonist in this.
Conrad.
I'm not convinced. Never convinced by him.
But you're not
To the
supposed
point where
to.
it was
Yeah.
quite funny towards the end, where it was like, he gets the monster on him. He's going, "Oh no, take him off me, take him off me." And the moment they take the monster away, he's like, "Oh, actually, I'm still an arsehole." And it just carries on. And this happened about 3 times, and it was just like, oh, I want to take my bad guys seriously as well, especially with an interesting subject like that of
I
this
think, though,
this
that
embodiment of a lot of what's bad in the world at the moment. And it's kind of, I don't know, it feels like it's simplified to the point of not actually having any substance.
I think though that you're not supposed to. So I think it's been very cleverly done because I think it gets so close to him being convincing that you just think it's a fault maybe that the performance isn't quite good enough, but I think it's deliberate. I think it's a deliberate choice because the reason the Rani picks him up is because of all the incel type characters we've had across the season. He is the one who doesn't actually believe in it. And so that's why she needs him. So that's why we see the Rani or Mrs. Flood going to visit basically all the other incels, and all the other incels do believe in the shit they're talking, and she's not interested in them. She wants him because he's the one who doesn't really believe in the shit he's talking. And I think him not being convincing is entirely a deliberate choice, but it's so subtle and it walks such a fine line. And that was my problem with the start of the episode, but for me, I think that really works. Really.
What I did think worked was the fact that the angle that Ruby is taken in by him because she's at, this is how these people operate. He catches her when she's at a
Vulnerable.
vulnerable moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you do feel for her in that respect.
I think it's a really cleverly written episode, yeah.
Yeah, 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 mostly, and we've seen before that RTD's really good at this stuff.
Well, and Pete McTighe, that's the two of them together, isn't
Yeah,
it, really,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think?
yeah. So I can't remember a huge amount about it. Oh, you had that nice scene where she's telling the story in the pub, and you start seeing stuff. You start seeing stuff from which, of course, makes you buy into the fact that Conrad's buying the story as well. So that was good. It's always good to see new stuff not been done before on the program. So that was good. So yeah, a lot of, I probably would have given it a 7 or an 8 out of 10, I would imagine, on the night.
Mm. Luke,
I always like Doctor Light episodes. Not just anything against Shigeru. It's just interesting, isn't it? It makes it feel like a world. So I was quite excited going in. It was the first one that sort of woke me up and was like, okay, it feels like it's doing something different for the first time in 4 weeks. Exciting. Uh, there is something about the image of Conrad dressed as almost like a school shooter walking into unit that is really quite brilliant and
yeah.
a different form of terror for Doctor Who that I enjoyed. And yeah, I read it totally that he was just a grifter that was making money off peddling his opinions. So I think the second half of the episode works a hell of a lot better than the first half, and that's
Yes.
that's the half I sort of remember him going into unit like just creating a fan base and everything. I
It's
do
the
struggle.
opposite of the well, isn't it? The second half makes the first half worthwhile, whereas in the
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
the
yeah.
second half totally destroys all your goodwill from the first
The
half.
first half is a bit of a struggle. Just like it is hard to buy that Ruby would ever go on a podcast and talk about the Doctor,
Yeah,
and
that immediately took me out of it. I was just like,
yeah, and also
why
not
would she do that?
know who he was. Like even if he wasn't big at that point, there must have been like a few fans. The guy going to unit is listening to his podcast, and later on is revealed to be one of his followers. So it's definitely not worth looking too deep at, and I think that's why I've
Although
sort of stayed away from it.
I suppose there are explanations you could make. Like if the guy who is his insider at UNIT is the guy who's responsible for looking into that stuff and making sure it doesn't happen, then potentially he tips the nod to Ruby. Yeah, it's fine for you to go on this podcast, and then keeps it from the other people at UNIT that that's what she's done. So
Very
there
true.
are explanations that could be had if you were to look for them. So I mean, they take a lot of shortcuts. That story has got twice as much narrative as, yeah, it's got 7, 8 times as much narrative as Lux or The Well, but it's got twice as much narrative as a normal
Yeah,
45-minute
I
episode.
think just
So they
after
take
like
shortcuts.
after 20 years of the Doctor handing out CDs and going around the universe to raising himself, it's very odd to see everyone be okay with a companion just go on a podcast and talk about it.
But then
It's,
again, the RTD era takes place in a world where UNIT have got giant tower in the middle of London with the word UNIT written on the side.
See, this
yeah,
is the danger
I know.
that when you start talking about like the reality is changing, you end up doubting everything in the series. So when you see them behaving like this, you think, oh, it obviously isn't real reality. This is all going to be undone at some point.
None of
No,
it
it's
feels
just
real to me.
yeah.
Well, Dylan, we're at the point now where we. Oh no, we can't bring you in, can we? Because episode 5. Oh, you no, you did watch the story in the engine. What did you?
Did.
What did you make of that?
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was lovely. I thought it was just like it was a paper thin plot, but it just held together really well with nice characters, like an interesting sort of focus on a culture that Doctor Who doesn't really focus on. And I was just wrapped up in sort of like quite a magical 45 minutes, I thought. And I thought Gatwa felt really at home there. And I just loved everything about it.
Fair enough. Okay, straight to Luke then.
Uh, I know why Dylan would like it. It is very Chibnall-y. It's got
Kind of
Chibnall
a
vibes.
contrary bastard.
It's got Chibnall vibes, hasn't it? Well, no, it's definitely
No, a
got
lot
its
of people
fans.
liked that,
Yeah,
apart from our listeners who voted it bottom.
I thought it was boring beyond
Spoilers.
belief. I was absolutely bored for 45 minutes. Struggled with everything. I thought it was structured badly. I thought there was zero plot. I mean, nowhere is it worse than when the guy is naming all the gods that he is for like 2 minutes, and then the doctor goes, "You're not those gods. I've hung out with those gods." And he goes, "No, I'm not actually. I'm not." And I'm like, "What was the point in that?" But the whole structure with Belinda being in the TARDIS for faffing about for 15 minutes and then sort of going through there and then walking in, it's and then I don't even know what it was all about. I described it as subtext without text, and I think that's where I'm going to leave it.
I think also I have to quantify that in an era where I am not enjoying it, finding something that I really enjoy, I probably put more emphasis on the fact that I'm enjoying it because everything around it to me isn't working. So I'm not saying this was the best story ever. It was just the one that worked the most for me.
But it did feel different, so I did get why it would bring you back in.
And I'd rather the show be doing interesting things and not quite nailing it than doing space
Oh, but I
babies.
thought this was so boring.
I'm with Luke. I respect, well, sort of, but I respect it for what it did. But it just felt like a really empty story to me, or not even a story almost. It felt
Yeah.
there was something about. I said this on the podcast. There was something about the way it translated to screen that just for me didn't work.
Mm.
Simon, what did you think? You're not in there, so I'm
Well,
guessing.
I'm just agreeing with everyone really because
Yeah.
I think everyone's got a point. I really agree with Dylan that I watched it and I think I just really enjoyed the fact that I was having to think about it. It was the one episode where I thought about it the most after I'd finished watching it. Because, it left you with questions of exactly what was going on. And you knew there was more to it. And and to see fairly challenging television on at that well, and I know it can be watched online and what have you, but at that time of night on a Saturday evening, it's great. It's brave TV, and that's all I ask for sometimes. But equally, I agree with you, JR, that your comment that it on the page it probably would have worked better as something a little bit more freeform, and it could have been a poem. It could have been a poem in a book about the Doctor, and it would have been read by a few people who would really love it. And but getting that onto screen, I mean, it was really tricky because you had that whole setup in the barber shop, and then there was this literally an LCD screen on the wall that was showing pictures. It was like it's like Jack and Ori or something.
Do you know
And
what?
that's kind of it's a brilliant, brilliant idea. And again, would be brilliant on paper, but making that work visually
Isn't
is
it
something
based?
else.
Isn't it based on the writer's play?
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah.
his play isn't about. I don't think it's about gods or anything like that. It's certainly not about Time Lords. But I think
It's like the well, then, isn't it? They've taken his play and they've tried to massage it into Doctor Who.
I
maybe.
think it actually gets stuck at the worst bit in between the two, though. So it's not like you can't enjoy it as just it's on its own play, and it's not really Doctor Who, and it sort of needs to go in one direction or the other for me to enjoy. And I don't mean make it less intelligent and make it
Yeah.
more Doctor Who.
No.
It it just sort of gets stuck in this middle bit where
Uh, uh,
it ends up to me being sort of identityless. Right,
Yeah.
apart from the visuals.
At least we got another 11 seconds of Joe Martin, though, eh? We've nearly got a
Yeah,
Nine.
and
quarter of a story.
they were
Nine.
all
It's nine.
they were
I
all talking
went
about it
through it
like it
and
was a
picked him
lovely
out.
thing. I thought it was a almost disrespectful thing to be like, we brought her back
She
for
got
nine
the
seconds.
same amount of airtime as Richard E. Grant did in Rogue.
Yes, absolutely.
Performances
Should
wise,
we
I
rename
thought,
her the cameo doctor rather than the fugitive?
yeah, it should be like a red cod piece.
Sorry, Sarah. Go on.
Sorry, you're going to be born in the 70s to get that. Um, but I thought all the actors put in pretty solid performances throughout that episode. So I think they did what they needed to. I thought it was great.
I thought a lot of them were quite flat, actually, the acting in that.
Okay.
The main villain, it was just like he just looked so bored and disinterested in everything. I couldn't follow him at all,
No,
really.
no, it was back
Mm.
to those realistic performances again. Like you're too used to everybody over
I
emoting.
don't know
Yeah,
how realistic it is though,
But
because
but don't worry, the intergalactic song contest just around the corner.
oh
Woohoo!
yeah, I thought you're talking about this story about Nigeria, but the monster, the god that's in it, is not from Nigeria. The writer left Nigeria when he was basically more or less in single figures. Not a single actor who's in it has ever lived in Nigeria. It wasn't as nice. I mean, it didn't. So it just didn't feel as authentic as it probably wanted to feel
I mean,
either.
I think it's as authentic as you're going to get without
Yeah,
literally
yeah,
going to
maybe.
Nigeria and getting an entirely Nigerian cast.
Well, and in RTD2, they're not going to go to Nigeria, are they?
No, exactly. This just stick it in one room, you know. We can do all this in a room.
That was it as
Yes.
well. Just another room.
Okay, let's move on then to the international. No, actually, I must tell you a story about something that happened as I was coming out of the car park at work today. There was a van in the street in front of me, and it did, like Simon just said. On the side was just this giant, the whole side of the van was an LCD screen playing a video. And presumably that was the case on the other side. And as I drove past it, the back as well, the rear of the van was just an entire LCD screen playing a video advertising. I don't know what
Was
it
it
was.
Dugadoo?
No, it wasn't, but it did make me think, oh shit, have I woken up in the middle of the story in the engine?
Oh, I thought you were going to say like the screen on the back of the van was showing the
Yeah.
front of the van.
Oh, I think you said the story of the engine.
I was driving a
Like they
van
were
this
sending it
week.
round.
Royal
Yes.
Mail vans, uh, obviously, you don't have a rear view mirror in a Royal Mail van because the back is solid. There's no glass. But so we've had some brand new vans in the office this week, and I was driving one yesterday where it's got an LCD screen from a camera at the back of the van showing you what's behind, and you keep looking up to it and you can't see yourself in the rear view mirror. It's a very weird experience. But also it's in ultra widescreen as well, way wider than a normal rear view mirror. It's so strange.
The future's wild, isn't it?
It's not the future anymore, Dylan. It's here. All right, the Interstellar Song Contest. Simon, we
Mm,
talked about Eurovision, and
yeah.
you hate Eurovision,
Yeah.
despite being on the podcast about
And
it. What did you think?
obviously I expected to hate this episode with a passion and ended up bloody loving it. Absolutely loved it. And I
Because,
just because it shouldn't have worked, but it did. And all of the elements that were there that should have irritated me to high heaven, Ryland and what have you, I just fully expected him to do some really over the top. And actually, it was a really nuanced, believable performance. And that's just kind of symbolic of the episode, really, because the production values had one of the greatest shots I've ever seen in Doctor Who, where the crowd was sucked up into space,
yeah,
which was completely, the power of that instance in the story was completely undermined by them soon telling us, oh no, they're just all out there frozen, and we've still got time to save them. It's like, really? But
oh, get with the program.
I know, I know,
Yeah.
I know.
It's New
Didn't
Earth,
like the
isn't it?
music, but that comes with the territory, didn't it? So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
You
Really
weren't
enjoyed it.
supposed to like the music, though, were you? That's kind of the point, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose.
Dylan, what did you make of the Interstellar Song Contest?
So this was the first one I watched because obviously I heard the Rani was back. So I was like, oh, I need to see how they do this. And I heard Susan was back and need to see how they do this. It turns out they weren't really. I could have just watched those clips, right? Because they weren't in any way relevant to the episode. And I was actually pleasantly surprised because it just felt like a bit of RTD1. So I was just, it was big camp, silly nonsense. As you said, it looked great. All the elements seemed to work well, apart from the weird reveal of the Rani. And I had a lot of fun. I still, Gatwas just doesn't do it for me. But I was like, okay, it's not what I want from a new version of Doctor Who, but at least it's doing what RTD used to do really well. And yeah, the frozen thing is a bit of a cop out, but it's like on New Earth where like, oh, if we pour all the all the antidotes over everybody, they'll all be fine and we'll cure everything. So yeah, I was surprisingly fine with it. Will I ever watch it again? No. But
Do you know what I was
I had
really
a good time.
amazed by it is that it was finally an opportunity because we all know that kind of that stadium was very similar to the Parliament, in the Star Wars prequels.
Mm.
And they got it right in that you looked around and you could spy for different aliens. And it's like, did somebody say that there were some pig guards
That was the
there?
Yeah.
the only recognizable thing. You've got the whole vast history of the show to pick from, and it was just the pig slaves from.
The pig slaves who had no logical reason for being
No.
there.
Yeah, they could have had a Monoptera, they could have had a Monoid, other things beginning with M, but no,
Yeah.
they went.
But no, somebody went back to
Laszlo.
America. Yeah. Picked up Laszlo. I think of those lovely shots that you get in some of the old Doctor Who comic strips where you look around, you can see a Dalek here and a
Yeah,
Cyberman there and all that sort of thing. Opportunity for that. Opportunity, which RTD's been taking at every opportunity to say, this is the Whoniverse. Look at all this stuff that you can start getting into and start asking questions about. Opportunity to do that, and it didn't happen.
yeah, very odd.
Yeah.
It's because he's
Yeah.
trying to move away from continuity.
But I think, okay, yeah, I don't think that's true. And I don't think he's ever really said that, has he? I think what's really been going on is he's been saying, here are 6 episodes for you to get into the program. And then here are 2 or 3 episodes where we get dug into the lore of the program because by now you've bought into the idea. Now we're going to sell you the back catalogue so you can go off and look for that.
It was a weird thing, though, I mean, it was weird to use the Susan thing at all, based on the fact that they didn't do anything with it. But it was a weird thing to do the Rani intro as like a mid-credits thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Professor Yana, Spyfall, all those things, you just think, even in Spyfall, where it comes out of the blue, it sort of works as part of the storytelling, but just tag on your big reveal.
And this is 2 seasons of
Yeah,
basically the primary mystery of
yeah.
what he's asked people to be invested in.
Because I think he saw Stephen Moffat do the same thing with River Song in Closing Time. You do the reveal just before the finale in order to get people excited to see the finale, right? So in
That,
Closing Time,
But you were getting different bits of River Song all the time
yeah.
through season 6. It wasn't
Ri-
just
oh
River Song didn't
yes,
just turn up, go, who am
oh
I,
no,
and
no,
then
no,
leave
not the
again.
reveal of who River Song is, but the reveal of who the killer is. So in series 6, the mystery is who shoots the doctor on the beach, and at the end of Closing Time, oh, it was River Song.
But that
No,
makes
but
that makes sense though, doesn't it? Because it's going into the finale on a
yeah,
cliffhanger.
but
This
also,
was, that's the
but
point. I
no, but
think or rather, I think that's what Russell T Davies saw and wanted to replicate.
you've already got from that skill Hitler that she's the assassin. Like you've had a whole episode about it, so you can do a little tease. All we've had is someone turn into the camera and go, "Oh, isn't it cold?" Or "Oh, have you never seen a TARDIS before?" And then
But
and
that's what
then
I mean.
yeah.
I think it's Russell T Davies trying to do what Stephen Moffat did,
Well,
is what I'm
he
saying. Yeah.
failed, like he has done at everything else.
I think like
He couldn't
the
stop talking though, didn't
It,
it?
yeah, yeah.
it
I
got
think
me
the
watching.
the reason it
Job
feels
done.
a bit shallow. And the reason the law doesn't particularly work is when these things were brought back in RTD1, you had the Daleks and the Cybermen and the Master, it was always referred to the Time War. It gave us a reason to care in the present tense through the Doctor because it was always what's happened in the Time War, and that was the present story. Where now it's just very much a case of the Rani's back. That you should care. Obviously, Dylan did, but trying to explain to my mum who the Rani was a more difficult conversation than I've had in maybe 10 years.
All you needed to say was you're just another Time Lord. That would have done it, wouldn't
Didn't
it?
do it. It didn't do it.
Did you have to sit her down and make her watch
Because
Mark of
then
the
she was
Rani?
like, who's Mrs. Flood? I'm like, it's the same one.
But I
Yeah.
Well,
think this
It
is the
makes sense
difference,
to
doesn't
us,
it?
but
Moffat used to feed you bits of story throughout the season, whereas Russell T Davies just likes to repeat a trope until the point that he reveals what the trope is. So it was the words bad wolf until the moment you find out what bad wolf is. But you never find out more about the words bad wolf until you get the reveal. And it's the same with Mrs. Flood. You didn't really find out anything about her across 2 years until all of a sudden she regenerates into the Rani.
the
And
thing, the
and
thing
it's all
about
that
Bad Wolf.
information in one go.
Bad Wolf, though, because it was the first time, people weren't necessarily. It
Oh,
was an Easter
yes.
egg, wasn't it? People weren't necessarily like looking for it, and then it makes the series more satisfying. This is the opposite, where it's in your face, and then it's not a good payoff, so it makes the series less satisfying.
Well, that's it. What you did in 2005 is not going to work in
Yeah.
2025.
yeah, because television was still a long form thing back then, whereas now we're very much into the era of the mini series. So Russell's sort of, as you say, copying Buffy was based on 24 episodes a year, and he was doing half that, and now he's sort of doing half that again. And
Yeah.
television's moved on. He's pulling from the wrong sources.
It's like if you did Series 8 again now, and it's almost, no, it's more than a decade now, isn't it, since Series
Yeah.
8? It's 11 years since Series 8. If you're doing that now, you wouldn't tease the mystery of who Missy is. You'd reveal it's the Master, and you'd have her pulling the strings behind the scenes in every episode, and the Doctor doesn't get to confront her till the end of the series. So you wouldn't necessarily do that, but you that is a thing that you could do with that story now, instead of just saying, right, here's a character, you're going to see her every week. You'll find out who she is at the end of the series.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Wish World. Have we been round this circle on Interstellar? Yeah, we have, haven't we?
Well, I was on the podcast anyway, but yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah, fair
It was a
enough.
lot of fun. I like end of the world like stories, and it was just like that for the modern day, wasn't it?
And
With songs,
it took
and
an
it gave us
idea.
Doo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wish we have had on in our household on YouTube on the sort of 24-hour Dugadoo. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's.
it's good. It's good stuff.
It took an idea and it committed fully to the idea, didn't it? In a way
Yeah.
that sometimes you don't quite feel necessarily that's been the case. Wish World. In fact, let's do the finale. Let's do both parts of the finale as one because it is all one story. It's not one of those things where it's two separate episodes telling two different halves of a story. It's just one story split with a cliffhanger. So the last two episodes, Simon, what did you make of the last two episodes?
I preferred the second half to the first half. Um, um,
Are you just
it's
going to keep
really hard to.
making funny
I
noises?
am good. I think that probably says more about it than anything.
That's all the finale did.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, as it kicked in, and we saw the Doctor and Belinda, who are now, believing that they're husband and wife, and he's all sitting up and smiling, and it's all a big show, and they're acting the part. Um, Again, I just wish it was kind of more believable, where you did really feel like reality had shifted, rather than them just thinking they were playing particular parts. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing the point. I don't know. But having said that, on an emotional level, it carried me along. And knowing it was, well, as knowing as best you can that it was going to be a regeneration story, I got caught up in the momentum of that. And I thought Shooty's performance reflected that he was kind of aware that this was something coming to an end. And I kind of felt that's what was happening. And I just wished that it had been there for the whole of his tenure, really. Um, so I couldn't, I've not watched it a second time. So it's one of those, I've spoken to a few people who've said it was a big mess. But that's exactly what I said about The Last Jedi the first saw it time I saw it, and it's probably one of the best made Star Wars films. I don't, there's a lot of misgivings
Get
about
away.
that.
Keep moving.
Yeah.
Get back to Doctor Who.
Okay. Yeah. But I actually think the fact that the last 15 minutes had to be changed and what have you just made, as JR said, made for a much more interesting story where you didn't really know where it was going. Um, yeah, yeah. So it was an interesting piece of telly. So I really enjoyed it.
Dylan.
I liked the first half of the second half, if that makes sense. I thought no.
You
So
liked the stuff with Omega that everybody's been complaining about.
yeah, I didn't mind it. I found myself pulled along in the adventure of the second episode, and then I looked at my clock as things were wrapping up and was like, "Oh, there's another half an hour left. That doesn't bode well," and I don't think it did. Do you know what I would have liked? I would have liked for Wish World to be the first episode of a new series.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, yes.
and you have a character called John Smith who lives in this bizarre reality. And over the course of a couple of seasons, he becomes less and less like John Smith and more like the Doctor. And he goes on bizarre adventures in and around Wish World. And at the end of it, you reveal the Doctor. I
Do you
thought,
know what? You've just reminded me of a thought I had this morning about because I've been saying for a little while about I'm going off on a tangent, but it might be worth it. Probably won't be. But I've had a thought for a while about I think Doctor Who should properly reset itself, but at this point I don't think they dare unless you do it in universe, and they keep doing mini resets, but they don't properly do it. And I've had a thought for a while that the only way you could do it is if you did a regeneration in the void. And by doing that, you could wash out the Doctor's memories and the TARDIS's memories and start again from scratch. And because you're doing it in the vortex, you could also wipe out everybody else's memories and properly start from scratch. And it just struck me this morning. This is how I'd start the Billy Piper special. Say Billy Piper's in a Christmas special. This is how I'd start. Lights up. You're in an A&E room, and there's all this chaos going on in the A&E room. Not like you get in a real A&E room, but like you get in a movie set A&E room. And there's all this chaos, and the camera's going through the chaos. Ambulances are coming in. There's people bleeding everywhere. All this stuff's going on. The camera keeps going through the room, and it just lights on this corner. And in the corner of this room, there's just two people chatting. And there's Billy Piper in her 40s, and there's a young guy, aged, what, 20, 25. And they're just having a conversation. And he says to her, "What are you in for?" And she says, "In A&E, you mean?" He says, "Yeah, what are you in A&E for?" She says, "Oh, well, I'm the doctor." And he says, "What do you mean you're the doctor? What are you in A&E for? You can't be the doctor. You're in as a patient." And she's like, "Oh, yeah." And he says, "Well, what are you called?" Oh, she said, "Oh, Rose. I'm called Rose." He says, "Rose what?" She says, Rose Tyler." He says, "Where do you live?" She says the name of an address. And he sort of scratches his head. And he goes, "But there's no houses there." And so this thing goes on. She goes in and see the doctor. The doctor says, "What have you come for?" And she says, "What do you mean, what have I come for? It's A&E, isn't it? I'm the doctor." And this goes on. And the doctor says to her, "Well, I mean, what's your problem? What's your illness?" She says, "I don't have an illness." He says, "What are you doing in A&E?" She says, "I don't know." He says, "Okay, let's just see if there is anything wrong with you." Takes the stethoscope out and it's like, "You've got two heartbeats." And she's like, "How can I have two heartbeats?" Anyway, it kind of, so the episode is sort of gradually unfolds around this mystery of why this woman who is Rose Tyler also thinks she's called the Doctor and seems to live in the middle. And basically, it's the Doctor refreshed. The TARDIS has implanted the personality of Rose Tyler over the Doctor, but you don't get Jackie.
and
You
she
don't
ends
get
up
House.
working in Holby City.
But you know what I mean? That's how I'd start it. That's where I'd take it. I'd refresh the program by making the Doctor learn who the Doctor is by having the face of Rose Tyler. And it's a really complete refresh. And then you can get into sort of like telling the first Dalek story again and all this kind of thing. And you can make Doctor Who new and interesting and exciting and innovative again, rather than going back
Sounds
to
like the
all your old
TV movie
ideas.
to me.
The
JR for
TV
show
movie's great, apart from the info dump at the start.
JR for showrunner, that's what I'm saying. Well, I mean, talking of info dumps, there was a lot of it, wasn't there?
Well, there is. It's a
It,
Russell T
look,
Davies finale, though, right?
I thought it was a mess. I thought I really did have a good time when he's flying through the bone creatures on that thing. Like I thought, like finally, I was like, the Disney money's finally arrived. It felt like a Marvel movie. For at the same time, the Bone Palace looked shockingly cheap. It was
It
all
did.
very, it was
Yeah,
all
it did.
very like sewn together and just felt like it all just felt so messy and so contrived and just like, oh, I've got a like I didn't mind the reason behind Omega being that version. I hate how quickly they disposed of the new Rani. I hate how easily he disposed of Omega. I hated the whole baby thing. I thought Millie was actually really good in it for the first time. Jodie Whittaker was there, so it's a 10 out of 10 for me.
In all of that, I really like the fact that Omega comes back the way he is. At the end
Yeah.
of the Three Doctors, right? Omega's absolutely mad and he's lost his corporeal form. So he has to make himself a new corporeal form and he's absolutely mad. This seems to me like a logical extension of where we leave him. Oh, and that brings up something else I've heard on so many podcasts over the last fortnight. Oh, but the description they give of Omega as having been bound and banished by the Time Lords doesn't correspond with the description that we were given of Omega at the start of the Three Doctors. Well, of course not, because the Three Doctors fucking happened since.
Yeah.
Right? So the Doctor is a Time Lord, and the second Doctor is also a Time Lord, sent there by the Time Lords. And at the end of that story, they basically bind and banish Omega, who is escaping from this other universe back into the universe that he's trying to escape from. So he's bound and banished by the Time Lords, being the second and third Doctors and the other Time Lords who sent him there. Russell T Davies is taking the Three Doctors into account. It happened 50 years ago. Who knew that something that happened 50 years ago could be in the past?
And we know it because Kate Lethbridge Stewart felt the urge in her 4 lines of dialogue to go, didn't my dad fight him in the 70s?
No, it was the 80s.
Luke, tell me what you thought of the finale, the two-part finale.
I mean, when I first watched Westworld, I thought, what a load of disposable shite that is, really. I totally get why people who were invested in the season and the mysteries, like Mrs. Flood and the Rani and Omega, would all be very disappointed. But for me, it came absolutely alive right at the beginning of the reality war when there was this child, and for like a week, you're going, is it Susan? Is it Susan's mum? Is it the timeless children?
There were so
And
many
then
rumors,
it's
weren't there?
actually like the most of well, it's the most simple thing. No, it's actually their child, and I just thought we've never done that, and it suddenly felt like one of the only episodes this year where it had a new idea, and it was like forget the rest of it. We're going to go all in on this idea, and
Yeah.
I was just totally along for the ride with it. Um,
It was a bit like that film. So there's been a lot of these sort of, and so Severance is another example, isn't it? Where there's an alternative reality taking place sort of at the same time as real reality. That film with Florence Pugh that Olivia Wilde did, the name of which escapes me, we reviewed it on the podcast a couple of years ago. That did a similar sort of thing. Doctor
I
Who's
just
never really done that, has it? And it
No, I
was,
just didn't then care about I mean, I enjoyed like Mel being all sassy with the Rani and stuff like that, but I didn't mind what happened with any of it because it all felt disposable anyway. And maybe that's a failure that I got over a few weeks beforehand so that I could come into the finale and just vibe with it. But yeah, I had a great time and I agree. Like the last 20 minutes, it was like I've no idea where this is going to go. I don't even know if he's going to regenerate properly. There's still like a little bit of uncertainty, isn't there? And that was really genuinely exciting. And so what rewatching just the regeneration bit the other day, it, it's it's quite sad because you know it's not the plan. The regeneration works so much better, the one that's artificially built up to a perfect
yeah,
ending, because it is like someone has actually died, someone's been snatched away, and the regeneration for me works so much better than quite a lot of the other ones because of that reason.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
melancholic and it's sad because you knew that you were meant to get more shitty Gatwa.
Oh yeah, it was
When
so
Tom
sad.
Baker says, when Tom Baker tries to tell you that he's going too soon, and you're thinking, no, mate, 7 years. Honestly, you're not going too soon.
But it's not even just the fact Shitty Gat was gone, I think. It's just the fact the whole era hasn't quite gone to plan. And that whole regeneration is symbolic of it that
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
it a little bit sad. Well, it makes it, yeah, it just works.
It makes it work on different levels in a way that normally regenerations just work on two. It's sad to see the character go, and it's sad that the actor won't be playing that part anymore, but that's about it, really,
And this
because Doctor Who moves on.
brand new energy turning back into something we've seen before.
Well, yeah, but you know
Which
what I
is
mean?
also symbolic of Russell just eating his own tail from the moment this era began.
Talking of
Basically.
which, though, I have to say the scene with Jodie was it just made the whole episode worth it for me. I suddenly saw her being the Doctor I always thought she was, and I'd not really seen little bits in her tenure of the potential she could have, the potential fully formed, wonderful, upstanding Doctor that she could have been.
I see, I've seen
Um,
a lot of people say, oh, if only Jodie Whittaker was written like this and played like this all through the Chris Chibnall era. But if Russell T Davies had been writing 60 minutes of Jodie Whittaker, he wouldn't have written her like that, and Jodie Whittaker wouldn't have played it like that. It's like that because it's that one scene and it's right for that one scene. It would not have been like that
Also, she's like
if
that loads
I
during
thought
the
it's
re
yeah, I
well,
thought to
yeah,
be honest, she was
I
just
think she's
like that anyway.
exactly the same.
Yeah, no, I
I
didn't
don't
see
think
any
there's
change. I
anything
thought
to
she
do.
was good.
Well, maybe it's the way it's filmed or something. I don't know. I just thought it was a brilliant little piece of telly, and it was just like, one of these great multi-doctor scenes. I
It
really
was.
enjoyed it.
I do wonder whether he'd had him in the back of his mind. Oh, we'll do a Jodie and Shooty episode and in series three, and then obviously couldn't. So he was just like, right, we've got 4 minutes, let's go.
It did feel right for some reason. Those
Yeah,
two doctors, it did feel right.
yeah,
yeah.
or just that he needed a doctor to sort of preempt the regeneration
And
and
most of
like
them
it
hate
was.
him, so they couldn't come back, and they've just had David.
Well,
And again,
it was, yeah, yeah. It
I
was
don't know
either
how.
Eccleston who wouldn't have done it, Capaldi who wouldn't have done it, Tennant who's just been in it, Smith who's too busy to do it, or Jodie.
But you say all this, but when Jodie turned up in the cinema and there was screams that people were
Yeah,
very
yeah.
excited, but like
A
your
bit like
brain,
they screamed for 9 seconds in the story in the
you,
engine, right?
you, in the cinema, your brain doesn't work normally. So then you're like, well, I've got Jodie. So I was fully expecting to see that the lot.
Yeah, I did wonder
Yeah.
whether if we were heading towards the end of the new series, whether
Yeah,
they,
Capaldi, Matt Smith. I thought there's a chance we might see them. Oh, I was so
Mm,
excited. It was
mm.
so exciting. And like the Billy Piper thing, uh, as much as it's probably a terrible idea, people did cheer. People shouted, "What the F!" right there in the cinema, and it was exciting. Just that moment. And I do think it's more exciting than it just going to black, regardless of
Yeah, yeah.
whatever happens next. It at least has got people talking.
I think you should only ever go to black if you are guaranteed to come out the other side and you know what it is that you're going to do when you come out the other side. If you go to black when you don't have a guarantee of what's on the other side, you're basically just writing your own epitaph, aren't you?
Yeah, great point.
Thing is, that I had a theory, and this is going back to Lux. I thought that whole thing of breaking the fourth wall was leading towards the whole series breaking through. And I thought when everything was going to drop through, it was going to drop through to our reality.
Oh, no, but he did that, didn't he? He didn't do it like that, but you had the bit where Shooty Gatwa breaks the television screen or the
Yeah.
mirror or whatever, but breaks through into a new reality. So you did actually have that. It didn't happen as we thought it might do,
Yeah,
but it happened.
I think people were expecting us because it did feel like it was going that way. You could totally buy into that theory
It was like that
because,
Red Dwarf back to reality thing.
yeah, I'm not sure it would have been a good idea, but you could see
No.
why people thought it. Even like the teaser trailers for this season was them in The Apprentice and in the traitors, and people were going, oh, "This is all going to link into the finale." Actually, it was just big bone dinosaurs being shot by a revolving tower.
But Russell T Davies did kind of do what Stephen Moffat did with Amy in series six. So in the first half of series six, we see everything from we don't realize it until we get to the end of the Rebel Flesh. But then when we realize we've seen everything that she sees that her avatar's doing, and because we've been seeing throughout the series what, as it turns out, is Madame Cavarian opening the box and saying hello to her and then closing the box. And we didn't realize that that's what we'd been seeing, but we had. It means that actually those first six episodes, or maybe the second to the sixth episode of series six, we're not watching what the Doctor's doing. We're watching what Madame Cavarian is showing Amy in the box that the Doctor's doing, and Amy's controlling her avatar. And I think Russell T Davies has done his version of that, and his escape from that is to move into a new universe again, like we said before, Luke, rather than to go back to the old universe. But yeah, I do think that the whole of the last 2 years has kind of been an alternative universe
It's
that we've
felt like
escaped
one to
from.
me.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, we've been going for way longer than we were supposed to. So let's close out. But final thoughts, and not about the future of Doctor Who, but about how much we have enjoyed or not the last year. Maybe let's talk 2 years of Doctor Who, this era, I guess, because this era is over. I'll go to Dylan first because I'm sure he can spew it out in 30 seconds. We can move on from it.
I'm just so very tired. I just hope it's over for a bit. I really don't want any more of the show made by this creative team. I just want it to rest a little bit and somebody interesting to do something interesting with it. But there's nothing in these last two seasons that says this is the right person to be making the program on any level.
Okay, then, since you brought it up, how would you feel about if Russell T Davies moved upstairs, was an executive producer?
I don't want him anywhere near it. I prefer it if Bad Wolf weren't near it, to be honest. I think all of the people making it do not have the right temperament to make it a hit in the modern broadcasting sense. I think they were the right people in 2005. I think they all need to go away. Every single one of them. Andy Pryor's gone. I think they all need to go. Get new
I
people.
do sort well, yeah, I basically do agree with you. Like, if it's going to be a hit again, if it's going to be exciting again, I think it needs someone just that has not been there, just as a detached person coming in.
Well, or even not somebody who's not been there, but somebody who has been there who's not showrun. Because if you bring a new showrunner in and maybe a new production team, what you get is a new imagination coming to it. Right, I mean, Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who was different enough from Moffat's and from Davis's, and Moffat's Doctor Who was different enough from Davis's. What we really need is a refresh
But
like that.
I think they were small changes. I think what we need now is actually a much bigger change, I
No, I
would
don't.
say.
I don't think we need a massive change because Doctor Who is successful and does work as it is. It's just come to the end of this life, maybe. So what we need is a change that's not a massive change. Don't throw the baby out with the dishwater.
Oh, I think throw the fucking baby out. Pull it.
Poppy's out. I see. I don't think it particularly needs a rest. It's probably going to get one for at least a little bit, but I think you just change the structure and the vibe of the show. So yeah, like instantly changing it to an anthology, to
Serial.
a serial, yeah, a six-part serial. Cut the episodes down, make it more length. Find a way to do that that's new and exciting. I think if you change the structure, it instantly becomes new and exciting anyway. So.
Mm.
So, but on the question of the last couple of years, then, Luke, I mean,
It, Empire of Death was the turning point where I was really having a good time with it. I sort of in the back of my mind knew that we weren't doing anything new, but you know what? I hadn't had a great time during the Chibnall era. These felt like Doctor Who was back a bit more. I was having a good time, and then I sort of lost the goodwill there. And I think the big irritation of it is that Rusty Davis is sort of doing what we did in the mid '80s of just eating the history, not particularly doing anything new with it. There's little glimmers of good stories and good ideas here, there, and everywhere, but it's you, the show. It just feels too similar to what we've had before. Fundamentally, that's always been the problem with this era. So it there are episodes I really like 73 Yards and the Instar Song Contest, and I think the it not going to plan has ended it on actually quite a high for me.
Yeah.
but it's never going to escape that feeling that I could whatever they do in RTD2, I could probably get better somewhere else in Doctor Who's long history.
Yeah. Simon?
Um, there's been, I think I said to you, there's been lower points and higher points. The lower points are where it was emulating the worst aspects of the first Russell T Davies era and the classic series, to be fair. And the high points were where it was trying something different, as Doctor Who always has done, and those have always been the bits that have lived, have stayed with us. But the guys are right in as much as, is it a series that's been designed to sell the back catalogue? And is that have we reached that point where the show can't move on from what it's been before, and it does need something new?
Maybe that
Yeah,
point where Russell T Davies at the 60th anniversary says, yeah, to the BBC, throw the whole of the back catalogue up on iPlayer. Maybe that's as far as his thinking went.
yeah, maybe so, maybe so. But I think, yeah, all the time, a lot of the creative team are in place, and I mean this with the greatest respect of their genius and what they've done for the show. But yeah, maybe it's time for something completely fresh. Because I think all the time that any part of this creative team, and we see it in the casting, that it's the same faces appearing again and again. We're now seeing it with Billy, we're seeing it with Russell Tovey, you know. Oh my God, this there's a plethora of amazing actors and people that we've never seen before. Let's get them in because it's not always about familiarity, is it?
But then again, here's a thought to sort of maybe end on. There is no other program like this, is there? So there's no other program that just so every time Star Trek comes back, it's a different iteration. But Doctor Who is the only program that's been going for not 60 years. I mean, it's been around for over 60 years, but it's existed as a program for what, 45-ish of those 60 years. So it's a program that's basically been around for 45 years. It's a program that's around, I mean, it's the same program. Should it change too much?
I
Or
think it
is it
has to.
just,
I don't think it will. I think there's a safety net there in that, exactly the same thing will happen the next year. Let's face it, Doctor Who for the last 20 years has been made by the people who grew up watching it, and the same will happen again. Russell T Davies has made that point, and he's absolutely right that whatever happens, people will come along who know what Doctor Who has been and what it should be, and we'll move it forward, but move it with the times. And at the moment, I think Dylan's absolutely right. It's not moving with the times.
but what I meant, yes, but what I meant was, we haven't got any comparison, have we? We've got no point of comparison for something else that's been around for 45 years.
Yeah, but also, I mean, what were the chances of it coming back in 2005 and A being a success, but also B just picking up where it left off?
Well,
It
that's
should
what I
have been
mean.
it should have been a reboot by,
It should have.
in many ways, but you know, there may be no comparison, but the comparison is sort of the show itself. And I think had it been a reboot, they would have found a way to tie it all together eventually, like they always will. And I think if someone came in
They
three
would have
years'
done the
time and
multiverse thing that
yeah,
Spider-Man did, right?
yeah, exactly. So I there is you're right, there is no comparison, but just because there is no comparison doesn't mean we somebody shouldn't do something remarkably different.
Right. On that note, then, we'll be back in a fortnight for the listeners' poll to see which stories they like best. Spoiler, the story in the engine didn't come last. Spoiler, it wasn't far off it, though.
Woohoo!
But I'm not going to give anything else away. In the meantime, well, I'm away next weekend, and so is Dylan. We're away at the same place. We're having our Glastonbury. We're too old for Glastonbury now. We go to Doctor Who conventions and hotels instead. So there's going to be a couple of pre-recorded episodes that go out in the week. One's on Simon and Garfunkel. One's a review of Come See the Paradise, which ties in very nicely with what's going on in America at the moment. And hopefully we'll have a film club duet about a couple of James Bond, not James Bond films to go out as well. But we'll be back with Doctor Who in a fortnight with the listeners' poll. Until that happens, I was JR,
I was Dylan.
I was Luke.
And I was Simon.
and we will speak again soon.